Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Laura Peña. I am the director of the South Texas Pro Bono Asylum Representation Project. It's a mouthful, but shorthand, we go by ProBAR. ProBAR is a project of the American Bar Association, and we're so excited to be able to share more about ProBAR's history, our mission, and our vision, and really how we address the complex issue of immigration here at the border. You're joining us here for what will be a conversation about what the state of immigration is on the border and how the ABA and ProBAR together really work hard to address some of these critical pressing issues. I'm going to turn it to my fantastic panelists here for them each to introduce themselves before we get started with some of the substance. I'll turn it to Meredith first.
Good afternoon. My name is Meredith Linsky, and I serve as the director of the ABA Commission on Immigration. I'm speaking to you today from my home in Maryland. The Commission directs the association's efforts to ensure fair treatment and due process rights for immigrants, asylum seekers, and refugees within the United States. In my role, I oversee the activities of the Commission that include our 4 offices, our membership, and staff nationwide.
Wonderful. Welcome, Meredith. Bonnie.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Fote. I'm a member of the Commission on Immigration's Advisory Committee. I'm an attorney here in San Francisco, and I do pro bono work in the immigration area.
Excellent. Thank you, Bonnie. Paulette.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paulette Garza. I'm a staff attorney at the Children's Department at ProBAR. I'm zooming in from the very hot Harlingen, Texas, and I work with children. So I represent children that are in ORR shelters or are locally released with their applications for relief and in court.
Thank you, Paulette. Lilia.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Lilia Garcia. I'm a social worker, also here with a ProBAR office in Harlingen, Texas. I work in the Relief Support Department, and we provide support to clients that have social service needs, whether they're children, adults, or family units that are adjusting to their new life here in the U.S.
Thank you so much, Lilia. Well, we're going to hear a little more from each of our panelists, and then we'll open it up for questions for the audience. My role as moderator, before we turn it to each of our panelists, is to set the stage a little bit. In 3 minutes or less, what is the state of immigration on the border? So this is very big picture, very high level. Let's first ground you in our location. Many of us here at ProBAR are coming to you from Harlingen, Texas. That's where I'm at. It is in a region called the Rio Grande Valley, which is the southernmost tip of Texas. We are right off of the Gulf of Mexico and adjacent to the country of Mexico. It is the borderlands. It's the border region. It's the Texas-Mexico border region, and it's also extremely warm, as it has much of the country been actually for the last few months. So we empathize with other states and regions of the country that are really hot because it's been hot for a number of years here as well. So that's where we're located. In terms of the state of immigration, I'm going to bring us to some recent history, but some of you all may remember in May, there was a shift in policy, a big policy that was covered a lot by the media outlets. That was called Title 42. Title 42 was a policy that was started by the prior Trump administration and continued under the Biden administration that essentially closed the border in the name of public health. We are all still coming out of the throes of the pandemic, but part of the end of the public health emergency also ended this immigration policy. Now, folks may remember there was a lot of media frenzy at the border. The border's going to be open. A lot of people are coming in. And what happened as that transition and the end of that policy happened was we really didn't see that come to fruition. And so what I want to communicate to folks listening is, the border is safe. It is a region in which many people live and thrive. Communities, diverse communities, have a robust economy. Quite often it's a binational economy that requires both movement and trade of goods across the border. But since the end of that policy, a number of other policies have replaced it, and which were actually part of the reason why we didn't see a large influx of migration as Title 42 ended. So what has taken its place? Very briefly, we've seen an unprecedented use of technology here on the border. CBP1 is an application, it's an app where individuals seeking entry to the United States can make an appointment to be processed in a safe, orderly way. This is a new technology which has challenges and benefits. We've also seen the creation of a new policy that's under litigation right now, but that's called the Circumvention of Lawful Pathways. This is a Biden policy that has made rapid deportations even faster, and has created a number of what I call bars or penalties, you could say, that limit eligibility for asylum. So that's a new rule. We've also seen an innovative use of what's called in our immigration law, the parole authority. So this is the ability of the government to provide entry to the United States in a safe way. And so there's creative use of that authority for particular countries. We've also seen the Family Expedited Removal Program. And so this is a new program that's doing the rapid deportation process for family units that are moving into other parts of the United States. It's a new program. We'll see how it's implemented. We've also seen more recently proposals for potentially emergency short-term detention here on the border. We all know history tends to repeat itself. And one of the benefits of being a project of the American Bar Association is that they have a long history and commitment, as Meredith mentioned earlier, of protecting due process rights for migrants and asylum seekers at the border. So before I turn it to Meredith, what you're going to hear more is about the reality on the ground, the human face of what we are dealing with. It's not just policy, it's not just rules, but there are actually human beings at the center of these issues. And we look forward to sharing those stories with you here today. I will turn it over to Meredith. Meredith, can you share with us a little bit about the history of ProBAR, how it was founded?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Laura. So actually, it was the spring of 1989, 34 years ago now, that a delegation of lawyers from the ABA, the State Bar of Texas, and the American Immigration Lawyers Association first traveled to South Texas to examine firsthand the situation at the border affecting asylum seekers and visit the facilities that had been set up to detain them. On March 31st of 1989, this might be interesting for you to hear, the detained population in the Rio Grande Valley was 3,600 individuals. The goal of the delegation was to assess the extent to which legal information and representation were available to the people in detention and determine how the private bar could increase representation rates of detained asylum seekers. Sound familiar? We're still grappling with that question today. The visit was prompted in part by a call from the former commissioner of the Immigration and Naturalization Service, the predecessor for Department of Homeland Security, for the private bar to step in and assist with pro bono legal assistance. And obviously, the need for asylum seekers to have legal resources to be able to identify whether or not they would be eligible for asylum in the United States. At that time, we were talking about mostly asylum seekers from Central America. So, as I mentioned, in early 1989, the federal government was detaining thousands of individuals in facilities in the Rio Grande Valley, including the Port Isabel Service Processing Center that continues to exist today, that ProBAR continues to serve today. It had a permanent bed capacity of 1,100, but they had increased it to 5,000 at that time. The Red Cross had opened 2 shelters, one in Brownsville and one in San Benito, to house families. And I actually remember going to that facility because I was a volunteer at that time at a sister organization, and I would go check out my clients and they would come with me and we would sit down at Dairy Queen and fill out asylum applications. I mean, that was just the extent of what we were doing then. And then there were 2 smaller shelters for unaccompanied children. Today there are 25, 26, but at that time there were 2 and they were both under 50 beds. In reading the report from that 1989 delegation, I was struck by how many of the issues have not been resolved and have only worsened over the past 34 years. The introduction to the report notes, United States asylum and refugee policies have been passionately debated in recent years. With the surge of Central American asylum applications on the Texas border, these issues have again moved into the front pages of major US newspapers and captured the attention of Congress. That paragraph could have been written today. The reality is migration will always be a human reality, and it reflects geopolitical conditions well beyond the US border. The Rio Grande Valley, like Laura mentioned, is the southernmost point of the continental US and the closest route to reach the United States from Central America, which makes it a popular spot for smugglers and others seeking to reach the United States. And while in recent years we've seen shifts in the nationalities of asylum-seeking populations, for example, more recently, in addition to Central Americans, we see populations from Venezuela, Colombia, Nicaragua, Ecuador, Haiti, Russia, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of Afghans and Ukrainians who have entered the US through parole in recent years. But the constant debate about access to asylum, asylum procedures, and detention levels have continued. As a result of that exploratory delegation in 1989, ProBAR was founded through a collaboration of the ABA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and the State Bar of Texas. And that collaboration persevered and continued through 2007, when the ABA converted those working at ProBAR to become ABA staff members. Initially, in 1989, there was 1 attorney coordinator and 1 paralegal. Today, ProBAR has over 250 staff members. ProBAR is one of 3 offsite programs managed by the Commission on Immigration. The other 2 are the Immigration Justice Program and Project in San Diego, California, and the Children's Immigration Law Academy in Houston, Texas. IJP is an expert legal service provider in the San Diego region. They serve detained and non-detained populations. SELA is a national legal resource center focusing on children's immigration law. The Commission puts the ABA's motto of defending liberty and pursuing justice into action through its programs on the ground, its expert members, and talented staff. Thank you for this opportunity to address you this afternoon.
Thank you, Meredith. Wow, history really does repeat itself. So that paragraph was, I got goosebumps. You're right, it absolutely could be written and published today. So still grappling with some of the same issues. But maybe, Bonnie, you can share some of your insight. You recently traveled to South Texas as a volunteer. Given the complexity of these issues, what was your experience as a volunteer? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to travel down to Harlingen for a week on a pro bono trip. And one of the opportunities that we had there was to go out to Port Isabel Detention Center, as Meredith had mentioned, and meet with recent immigrants who were coming across the border and coming into the process that Lauda just explained is happening now on the border, which is happening super quickly, right? So when we met with people, we had a really short time to try and help them understand the process that they were in and the law that was going to be applicable to them. So we met with one man. I'll just give one example. He had met just a few days before with an asylum officer who had determined that he did not reach the credible fear levels that were required for him to stay in the country. He was going in front of a judge in an hour to make his final appeal, to be able to stay and to state his claim for asylum. So as we started talking with him, we wanted to learn more about his story. And so he started talking and we had a little conversation. It was a little puzzling for me because it became clear to me that he hadn't really understood the parts of his experience that were important and would impact his asylum claim. And he hadn't been given the opportunity or asked about these areas by the asylum officer. So it was really important to take the next 10 minutes before he went in front of the judge to try and prepare him for his hearing with the judge so that he would understand what elements of his story were going to be important to the judge and to make sure he could advocate for himself, since most people are appearing pro se just on their own in front of these judges because there's no right to counsel. So we walked away a little bit nervous, weren't quite sure how it was going to go. But when we came back and met with him 2 days later, he was beaming. He said it had gone really well in front of the judge. He didn't quite know what that meant, but we found out later that it meant that he had reversed the negative finding of his CFI. And a week later, he's released to a sponsor so that he could begin the work of putting together his asylum application. And he just told us how grateful he was to have that 30 minutes with us to really hone in on the important factors of his case and what a difference it made to his life. And so with that kind of impact, you can see how important this work is going on at the border. And I'll just turn it back over to you, Lauda, so we can hear more about the work that's happening at ProBAR.
Absolutely, Bonnie. You know, that is why we continue to do what we do. They say knowledge is power. And I think in many instances, at least in our experience, legal knowledge is transformative, transforming people's lives. And that is, it's empowering, it's, it's delivering education, right? And as lawyers, we're trained to apply facts to the law. And the beauty of the practice of immigration is that we get the opportunity to learn about people's stories and listen for those facts to help them apply their life experience to the law. And that's what it means to be able to empower immigrants through legal education and representation. Now, Bonnie, you weren't there with him in the hearing, were you?
No, he was great. He did it all on his own, and he was very appreciative of kind of having an understanding of what was going to happen in the process in front of the judge, as well as kind of, a skeleton to lay his facts on in terms of what the judge was going to be looking for and thinking was important. So he did it on his own. He was fabulous.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bonnie. And that's just for the audience as you think about if you want to get engaged either in your own communities or more engaged with the ABA, there are opportunities to help render legal education and still not take on fully a case. So we've found ways to help leverage talent to help scale our services to others. So that's from a pro bono perspective. We're going to transition a little bit to some of the services that ProBAR provides. Paulette's going to be speaking about the attorney experience here, share some highlights that she has with particular clients. But more broadly, Meredith mentioned we have a staff of about a little over 250 people, and we provide direct services. So much of our work is on behalf of unaccompanied children. For those who aren't familiar with that term, it is a legal designation, but it basically basically means a minor who seeks protection in the United States arrives to the United States without a parent or legal guardian. And last year, ProBAR served nearly 30,000 unaccompanied children by delivering Know Your Rights presentations, helping conduct legal assessments. And I just read a powerful story about a young football player with Colorado State who it seems like he was an unaccompanied child and made it through the process in 2016. And now he's a dynamic football player at a top state university. So the number of people that we serve and their stories, you know, they come to the United States for a variety of reasons, but we're so grateful to be able to accompany them. We also serve adults. Bonnie gave you an example of some of the work we do in adult detention centers, and we have a growing program here in the Rio Grande Valley, serving immigrants who are have to appear in immigration court. So that's big picture, some of our services, and we're always looking for pro bono engagement in all categories. But Paulette, you're an attorney with our children's program. Why don't you share a little bit with the audience your experience as an attorney with ProBAR?
Yes, of course. And actually, you stole the words right out of my mouth. I was going to talk about how knowledge is power and how I believe that ProBAR, one of the great things they do is the charlas, which are the Know Your Rights presentation, like Laura mentioned, for the children in ORR care, for the adults in detained detention centers, and for the individuals that are in removal proceedings in the Harlingen Immigration Court. I have seen the impact that these charlas provide to individuals, and I believe that this immigration system that they stepped into is complex and confusing to even attorneys in other areas. So it is wonderful that we are able to, all as a team, be able to explain the process and explain what kind of relief is available for them in a digestible way. But in my experience, I work with, like Laura mentioned, unaccompanied minors. And I believe that representation is so important because Vera found that 4% of unrepresented clients in comparison to 48% of represented clients found positive outcomes in their cases. That goes to show what impact representation makes. To me, I've been able to have the wonderful opportunity to meet with children from amazing, wonderful, dynamic, and they're just confused. They want to know what can they apply for, what's the court process going to be like. And I have been able to talk to them and explain what is the process and assist them in their applications and in court when they're locally released. If you can indulge me for 1 second, I would love to give a story of one child that I worked with particularly about a month and a half ago. She came into this country when she was 11 years old, unaccompanied, and she was here in an ORR shelter for a few months and then was released to her family who had been here previously. And then she was here for about 2 years. And then she had issues in home country, so she went back home. And then she did not understand, because she was so young at that age, that she was not going to be present in court, that she had a court process that was ongoing. So she did not realize that she had an in absentia order against her when she came back into the country at 17 years old, about a month into aging out of the ORR shelter. So she was very frightened. Thankfully, thanks to our UC specialists who do the intakes and talk to the children and get their stories, she was flagged to us and I was able to represent her in her motion to reopen. It was granted. And she was very thankful to have, in Spanish, she said, una nueva oportunidad, a whole new opportunity to look for relief and see how she can fight her case and not lose the opportunity to the legal system that she is allowed to have because she left at such a young age and didn't understand the repercussions of that.
Wonderful, Paulette. Yes, that is extremely powerful. And for the audience, an in absentia order means that this particular client was at risk of deportation. And so she had an order of removal that Paulette was able to, leverage the law and advocate on behalf of her client so she could try and seek the relief that is available to her. So excellent work. Thank you for sharing that story, Paulette. Here at ProBAR, we are also very proud to have innovative approaches to our work too. And in the last few years, we have started what we call our Release Support Department, which is really a little bit of a misnomer, but we have a number of social workers, clinicians, and the initial idea was to make sure, because the Rio Grande Valley is a place where many are here temporarily, and then they leave. They have other destinations in the US, so we want to connect them to services. It's part of our mission to connect them to services. And so it's a release support department, but it's much more than that. It's become much more than that in the sense that we are attempting to ensure that all of our services are delivered in a trauma-informed way. So with that, I will have Lilia share with you a little bit about the department's efforts, and if we have some time, a story as well.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Laura. Yes, a little bit about our services here with ProBAR. We understand that many of our clients are already working with an attorney. Maybe they've already been working with a UC specialist on the intake. So as we're working with the clients and understand that they do work with other professionals, we do use like a wraparound service model where we're collaborating with other professionals that are also working with a client, but in a way to where each professional can really focus on what they're working while also making sure that the client's needs are being met, that they're being addressed as these come up, whether they're local or they're coming out of shelter. We take an approach to where we try to, maybe help them start kind of building up some supports for them as they're coming out of the shelter. So what this allows is, it really allows for us to be able to serve our clients more holistically, because each professional is working on an area, so we can work on the whole scope of what the client is needing. So our clinicians here at ProBAR, we have social workers, we also have therapists. We assess for needs that the clients may have. We do a screening and to any client that gets referred to us and assess for maybe other needs that have not been identified. Many times we can also see that some of those needs haven't been identified by the clients themselves as we're going through different areas of our assessments. So this is really important because it really allows us to be able to assess for what the client needs and allow the clients to fit more into their environment, start building those connections that they do need as they're reunifying across the country. So our clinicians, we are trained. We do make sure that we're always providing trauma-informed services to our clients. And what this means is that we're building a sense of safety with the clients, that we're building trust, collaborations with others, and very important, empowerment to the client. So we all focus on empowering our clients, helping them see how they can also work on addressing their needs based on what's available within their communities. A lot of times we see, as we speak to clients, they become empowered and they also start advocating for themselves on behalf of their needs. So this is really neat to see when they take the approach of, being more hands-on about what they need and trying to address their need based on how we've already helped them connect to resources that are in their area. So as we are working with clients, we do consider their experiences, right? Which means their background history, understanding their experiences and the changes that have been so sudden, sometimes in a few weeks, right, or months that they're, leaving their home country. They have an experience during their travels. They have an experience during the stays at the shelters, experiencing and adjusting into a new home, into a new environment, sometimes with even new family members that they maybe have just met in person, and now they're, they have to see how they fit into the new environment, into their new home. So we do see a lot of issues with adjustment into the home setting, understanding their new roles, right? So we know that a lot of our clients, as they're older teens, they maybe sometimes take an adult role in their home country where they have to take care of themselves. Maybe they had to work for themselves. And as they're coming into the US, they're minors, so now it allows them to focus more on their own, but it's hard to make that transition. So we do try to also help them see how things are changing and provide as much support as we can during those transitions. I think also very importantly is some of our clients do call in, right? Sometimes they're in a crisis situation. Maybe they're experiencing abuse. Maybe they're experiencing a mental health crisis. So having our clinicians on board helps us be able to identify the crisis, maybe provides a supportive role in the sense of they have a safe space to share, and then we can advocate on their behalf. We can, maybe connect them to a caseworker in their area if they're suffering abuse. If they're having a mental health crisis, can we connect them to their local mental health authority to make sure that they're safe, but also can we collaborate with their sponsors, with their families to help them get connected to these services and understand the importance of addressing mental health, which, as we all know, there's a whole other realm in mental health and the stigma and the fear of accessing, right, that service because we don't know what may happen if we do go into a mental health setting. Additionally, for clients who are here in the local area, since we do have therapists on board, we can also provide some of those therapeutic interventions to our clients who may not have access to them if we were not here. So we are able to provide some short-term counseling services, a little bit more connection to resources in their area so that they can build better coping skills, coping mechanisms, and maybe even sometimes just to learn about their conditions if they are experiencing any type of mental health condition or kind of adjusting to the changes and the trauma that many of them have experienced. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lilia. Well, this has been very informative, and there's a lot here that we could keep going on and on about. But I wanted to see if Bonnie, given that, okay, we've got complexity, we have legal work, we have this particular approach to connection to services, making sure we have a holistic model. Bonnie, we have folks listening in. What would you say to somebody who's considering getting involved in this type of work?
So I think the work is really impactful. You can really see from the stories that you've heard what a difference, lawyers can make and social workers and everyone can make in this area. There's a tremendous amount of need out there. And so I think that's also compelling. And there's a whole range of ways that, you can engage, from the bite size to, a longer term engagement in this area. And it can be, by, you contributing in a pro bono aspect or, contributing financially to support the tremendous work that's happening at ProBAR and all the projects of the Commission on Immigration. So I would just say, there's lots of impact here that can be made. And there's a high need. I mean, as we were talking about, there's no right to representation in immigration like there is in the criminal arena. And so there is just a huge need here. And, fulfilling that need can be really impactful to individuals' lives. Right. And just to clarify, right, you can have representation, but there's no right to appointed counsel like in Gideon in criminal cases.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. Yes, and it is a goal of the commission, and which ProBAR helps support to gain access to universal representation eventually in immigration proceedings. It's a lofty goal, but we believe we can get there with the power of the ABA and so many other advocates. Well, that is the conclusion for our panelists. We wanted to open it up to any questions from the audience. If you have any questions from any of our panelists, we first heard from Meredith Linsky, who gave you some history, some historical context about the ABA and ProBAR, the state of immigration on the border, which has changed but not changed in many ways. You've heard from Paulette, who's a dynamic attorney, representing unaccompanied children, Lilia, one of our key social workers. So I would open the floor to any questions. You can put them here in the Q&A. We are at about 12:38. It's a 45-minute webinar. So I'll leave a few seconds to see if anybody has any questions at all. And if there are no questions, I've been told webinar attendees appreciate getting time back, because we respect and value your time as well. If there's no questions here, again, we are so grateful for you spending time with us here today, learning a little bit more, not only about the issue, but how we are advocates here on the ground, a little bit more about the reality here on the border. Thank you all for spending time with us. I think Bonnie gave a great pitch to stay involved. You can find us on the ABA's website through the Commission on Immigration. ProBAR also has its own website. It's www.abaprobar.org. Stay in touch with us. We're also on the social medias, in particular LinkedIn. Again, thank you to the panelists. Really appreciate your thoughtful reflections and all the work that you do. And thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. Have a fantastic afternoon.